U.S. President Donald Trump has unveiled a phased tariff push targeting generic prescription drugs in a bid to reshore pharmaceutical manufacturing to American soil. Now, under the plan, imported generics will face 0% tariffs for 2 years, then 100% in August 2028, and then 200% a year after that. And more than 90% of all prescriptions sold in the U.S. are generics, which are manufactured with the same active ingredients as brand name drugs, but they typically cost much less. Around 70% of generic drugs consumed in America are sourced abroad. Existing policies on patented and branded drugs remain unchanged after major global drug makers secured exemptions through pricing and investment deals last year. But generics present a far greater supply chain challenge. Well, the stakes are high for India, as the country supplies nearly 50% of all generic medicines consumed in the U.S. The American market accounts for about a third of India's annual pharma exports, mostly cheaper versions of popular drugs. Chinese firms dominate supplies of key drug ingredients including those needed for antibiotics. Now, the key question is whether the tariffs will apply only to finished medicines or also to drugs made in the U.S. using imported ingredients. For more, we're joined by Dr. Joseph Carrello, Research Fellow, Health Technology Assessment, Melbourne School of Population and Global Health. Dr. Carrello, we thank you for your time today. Just for starters, how do you think that 100% tariff on generic drugs is going to work? Is it only going to be applied to the imported finished medicines or also drugs in the U.S. that are using the imported active pharmaceutical ingredients?
Thanks for inviting me on, Liz. So to answer that question, the tariff is a tax imposed on the imported good. So it would be paid for by the US consumers and the revenue going to the US government. In President Trump's statement, it doesn't specify the active pharmaceutical ingredients. So at this stage, it appears just to be applied or intended to apply to generics.
Right. Okay. So what does this mean then for the broader global pharma industry, the average consumer as well? Can they expect prescription medicines to become more costly? Could they expect shortages? Which type of generic medicines are going to be most vulnerable? As we talked about, stuff like the chemicals, the ingredients needed for antibiotics, for one.
Yeah, so as you point out, generics are very important in the global pharmaceutical system, particularly for government healthcare systems to help keep costs sustainable because they do provide the same active ingredients but at a cheaper cost. What I see, this will unfortunately affect the US consumers most because with these tariffs, it would make imports uncompetitive. It's trying to shift the manufacturing from offshore onto US local manufacturing. So that would lead to potentially less competition and then effects on price for US consumers. I wouldn't see any major impacts globally to other countries just yet. In countries like Singapore and in Australia, where the majority of pharmaceuticals are subsidised by the government, I wouldn't see any changes at all.
Yeah, so, definitely those consumers, they can expect the cost to go up. But realistically, how much can manufacturers absorb when it comes to tariffs of such a magnitude, 100%, then a 200%? And do you think that could force, manufacturers to exit certain products altogether?
So that's the intention, is that the tariffs would make these imported generics, I guess, non-competitive to the locally manufactured generics, so shifting consumption to, US products. I guess, the impact that might have is, as you pointed out earlier, India makes up about half the generic market in the UK and the US. So that would have a big impact on the Indian pharmaceutical generic companies, but potentially less of an impact on companies from China, which develop the active pharmaceutical ingredients.
Yeah, so just staying on the topic of India, which supplies nearly half of all generic medicines used in the U.S., We saw a massive sell-off in the Indian pharmaceutical stocks yesterday. Realistically, what options do Indian drug makers have, for one, to move production to U.S. for high-margin products, or to reduce reliance on the U.S. revenue and then instead move to other markets? How feasible are these options?
Yeah. So as you point out, that's their two options. They can either shift more manufacturing to the US. From reports, there is operational capacity, but I don't know if it will be commercially viable for them to do that. The other impact is that they might have to look at other markets to make up for that gap from the loss of the market in the US. But obviously, the US does make up a quite a sizable market, so they would have to look far and wide to, I guess, maintain their profit margins.
Yeah, and Doctor, the impact on China then as a major supplier of, active pharma ingredients?
As it wasn't specified that the tariffs would apply to those, I'd say there'd be less of an impact on China than India.
Okay, I also want to look at, the competition aspect, because this Trump administration has exempted many branded drug makers through direct negotiated agreements, including Pfizer, AstraZeneca. But then generic manufacturers, they appear to have fewer options for now. What do you make of this sort of different treatment? What is the impact on competitiveness of the broader pharma landscape?
I think it really speaks to that corporate power of those large organisations and potentially having the president's ear in terms of lobbying. But I guess I would point out that those big companies are heavily involved in research and development of new drugs and finding solutions to address things like rare diseases and a range of other more precision therapies that are much more costly to develop. So I guess it's trying to provide that incentive for those companies to continue to invest in new drug development to address a whole range of health issues.
All right, Dr. Joseph Carrello there, thank you for your time. He is a research fellow, health technology assessment at the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health.